Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be back with you. In the last episode that I did for the channel, I talked about hitting rock bottom and how that gave me the opportunity to change. And what I want to do this time is follow up on that and talk about what I did and how I did it so that you can use it in your life. For me, hitting rock bottom gave me the opportunity for growth and change. But I also want to make some disclaimers before I go into this. This is just my experience. It may not be your experience. And I am just giving you an example and a model. When I hit rock bottom, I didn't know it was going to happen. So I just went ahead with it. But if I had to do that over again, and by the way, you don't have to be at rock bottom to make a commitment to change. I would put together a support team before I started on this project because it is a big project. And the more people you have to give you feedback and support, the better it is. So, who could be on your team? Anybody that you trust, respect, and admire, and whose opinion you think would be helpful, whose feedback would be helpful. And that could be a counselor, that could be a social worker, that could be a life coach, that could be a pastor, that could be a mentor, that could be any member of your friends and family, that could be a nurse, it could be a regular coach. There are probably, I think most people have enough people to at least create a small team. And I think the counseling is what I would do just because I want an expert there to kind of help me along in dealing with things that may come up. So, but that's not necessary. That's just what I would do. Okay, so disclaimers are over. And I want to talk about what happens when you have a chronic illness and how you can get to this point. Chronic illness is an extremely disruptive event in most people's lives. And you become caught up with day-to-day survival. You end up in survival mode over a period of time because you gradually and sometimes very quickly get reduced down to the point where you're just trying to get through the next hour, day, week, whatever it is. And you just don't have the resources and the time to process all the information and events that are occurring. So once you do get in survival mode, attitudes can build up that you don't even realize you have. And they are very important. That's what came out to me when I hit rock bottom. And that's what I think anyone can find if they just get themselves into kind of a state of calmness and look deep inside and say, how do I really feel about having this illness? And for me, and again, this is me, it may not be the same things, but it was failing. I felt like I was constantly failing. This is a group, this is the first one. I was constantly leaving things at people's houses, leaving things in people's cars, leaving things in Ubers, leaving things on buses. It just compared to who I used to be, it was just almost complete failure. I had this thing, I lost debit cards and other cards because I would put them down somewhere with no memory at all of where I put them. And all those things can be caused by stress and any number of things. But the point is that to me, everything was another failure. I had times where I would get all ready to go somewhere and then I couldn't go because I used up all my energy getting ready. Another fail. The next thing was frustration. There's a lot of frustration involved in chronic illness. And I had a lot of trouble with that. It seemed like I could never get anything done. Never. I could never finish anything in one setting. And then something would happen, I would get distracted, it would sit there, I would go on to something else, and pretty soon I had 6 or 8 unfinished things just laying around my house, making me feel like a failure and frustrated. So double whammy. My best example is an appointment I had in the nearest big city where I get my procedures and stuff like that done. And I use a transportation service. And what that means is it can be a 4 to 5 hour experience. By the time you wait for the bus, there's other people who may be on, they have to be dropped off. I live the furthest away, so I'm always the first one picked up and the last one dropped off. So I decided that for this important appointment that I had been waiting months for, I was just going to take an Uber. I wasn't going to deal with the whole bus thing because I just didn't feel like I had the energy to do that. So I take the Uber. I go up to check in for my appointment and they say, oh, it's tomorrow. I had come on the wrong day. Double whammy. Not only the frustration of having to get back home, but I had to get up the next day and do it all over again. So that's an example of that. The next thing is fear. Fear is something that all humans have, and especially fear of the unknown. And unfortunately, that's exactly what you're heading into when you get a chronic illness. You're heading into this unknown future, this unknown zone. And when you are afraid, you don't think clearly. So of those three, the fear is the most destructive. And there's one more thing, but I'm going to save that for last. So what did I do? As far as the failing went, it's how I was interpreting it. I was interpreting it from the perspective of my old life. You're failing all the time. But actually what was happening is my body was desperately trying to communicate with me and say, hey, you're almost out of gas. Hey, slow down. You're running around too fast for the energy that you have. And once I started looking at it that way, it changed that from a negative to positive. And I got a lot of growth out of getting more comfortable and more familiar with my body and what it was trying to help me. As far as the frustration, sometimes in our lives, we do things a certain way, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it quits working and it doesn't work anymore. And that's what happened with me in frustration. I had to find a new way to deal with this new aspect of my life and not let the emotional feelings I had about that interfere so much. And the way I physically did it, I have a short episode called the minutes rule, and I just limited the amount of time that I spend at once. And when I get tired, then I walk away. And hopefully I can come back later. But if something sits around for more than a couple of days, I put it away. I put it away. I can always get it back out again. And just not having the stress from seeing all these unfinished things around you was another really huge help. The fear, all through history, the way out of fear has been to confront your fears. And it's the same story here. You have to confront your fears so you can release that energy. It's taking up such a huge amount of your energy. And there's two kinds of fears. There's the real, oh no, it's a tiger. And there's the created, which is called anxiety, which is what your fear of what could happen is. But in your mind, it's almost as real and as upsetting as if it actually were happening. And I know my anxiety always ran along the lines like, what else is going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? What am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do if that happens? So you can almost hear the energy sucking quality of that and what it does to a person. And anxiety is not an attitude. Anxiety is a medical condition. It can be crippling. And you need a physician, maybe a counselor, probably medication. So I want to make that very clear about this one part of that. That's not something you can, change your habits and fix. It is a medical condition. And it's good that we have all the things now that we need to treat that. So don't feel bad about that. Don't feel like that's any kind of failure. So the thing that I left until last was grief. And I think that's another thing that can just get sucked down so deep in there that you never think about it on the surface. But you've lost a lot when you get a chronic illness. It's a huge change. You've lost maybe your career, your friends, maybe even some of your family, due to the pressures that puts on everybody. It's not like a death. So I think that's another reason I tended to minimize it and say, well, like, it's not like somebody died. But I did have someone die, and I went to a grief support group. And that's when I realized that there exists out in the world a whole body of work that's been done on grieving and how to recover. And it's being expanded to more and more people. So what I did is I got to my little browser search window and I typed in grief support groups for chronic illness, and they're there. They're there. I don't want to recommend that because everyone has a different process. I saw a graph once where it said, okay, the stages of grief, and then it said my grief, and it was just, it was not going to fit into topics. But I know I was talking with a dear friend. Her grief support group was on an island with drums, and you could yell and scream. My grief support group was in some empty room in a hospital where a person came in. So there's a huge variety out there. There's probably something that can help you. But in the end, after all of that, whether you do grief support or not, you just need to accept that you've had a loss. And humans have a process we go through, illness, recovery, and our body wants to recover, and it wants to recover from grief. So there's a lot of things, again, on the internet that can help you deal with that. I don't want to give you some specific example because it's such an individual thing. And the great thing about doing this is you release the enormous amount of negative energy you've been carrying. And I don't mean that one carries when this happens. And that gives you all this new ground to bring in new ideas, new ways of doing things that are going to work much better for you and not be a drain. This is not easy, but the attitude I sort of adopted is, even if this takes years, those years are going to go by anyway. So where do I want to be at the end of that? I want to be where I am now, with a whole complete life that has an illness in it, but where it's not robbing me of anything. It's not taking things away from me. And all this really takes at the end is making a commitment and sticking with it, and not worrying about, get the clock out of your mind, because this is an individual thing. But all I can tell you is I'm nobody special. I'm nobody different. And if I can do it, you can do it. And I want everyone to know this possibility exists who has a chronic illness. I care deeply. And I want to just apologize here for the fact that I have the comments disabled. It's not that I don't want to hear your comments, I do. It's just that at this moment, I don't have the time or the energy to take on dealing with comments. But I am working on a solution for that. And I just wish everybody a wonderful week. I'm here for you. I understand what this is like. And just remember, if I can do it, you can do it.